So my first memory back in 2012, I think it was, one of my buddies, Michael Donnelly from high school, he actually started coming out here and riding a little bit, found it from Instagram and one day brought me out here. I remember actually coming out on a kiteboard, way too small for me, and I was out here riding and the whole 2 hours falling off the dock, falling at the first corner and just walking back, but never looked back and kept on coming since. So here at Ski Rickson, I'm the cable manager and marketing director. Day to day is mostly just making sure the cable's running right, fixing any broken parts, and a lot of maintenance around the building as well. Whether we're fixing docks, fixing boards, moving obstacles around, or just making sure the cable's running nice and smooth. My favorite part about working out here is the sport itself. I fell in love with it years ago and really enjoy spreading it to others, whether it's first-timers or just regulars from the area. It's one of my big passions, and it's very rewarding when I can help grow that passion in others.
Well, hello, everybody. How you guys doing today? My name is Jeff Fagan, and you guys were just taking a little sneak preview. Not even a sneak preview; it's been out, but that was a quick little 60-second short that I made on Tuesday, all using the Blackmagic. Now, as you guys could tell, there were definitely some minor things in the dock. This wasn't like a paid piece. This was really more of just an experiment to test all the different modes on the camera. But in there, we've literally got pretty much everything in all versions of ProRes. Didn't really shoot much RAW, as the goal was just how can I do a really quick shoot that I only have an hour to do, how will it come out? And that was basically how it was. We shot that thing in a little bit less than an hour. And it was a fun little experience. I got to test this thing out and run and gun, and to my surprise, it actually worked definitely a lot better in a run and gun scenario than I gave it credit for. Oh, wow, we got Craft Show in the house. Craft Show, how we doing, guys? Craft Show is one of our friends. They do a lot of work on the GH5 and the Red, and their work is absolutely spectacular. Check out Drew and Jeff at Craft Show. Holla, holla. So as you can actually see, we're using the Blackmagic today and to stream. We're also using the XLR inside the camera instead of using the zoom, which I normally use to do these streams. And gotta say, I was very surprised at how well this thing handles internally as far as the XLR and even the 3.5 millimeter jack. The preamps in this thing are amazing. So today's goal of the stream, we're going to go over a few things we didn't go over in the past few streams. One of the things I wanted to talk about today is this iPad app, which I'm going to pull up right here. Got this cool little app that Blackmagic made to control parts of the camera. I think that shows up. How's the quality of the adapter? Which adapter are you guys talking about? Are you guys talking about the XLR to XLR mini adapter? And I'll get back to that question in a second. I'm going to go through this iPad real quick. This is basically what you see when you have the iPad app. It's this, and you get to input metadata on the camera. It's a good first step. I know this has been out for a little while for the Ursa Mini Pro. There's some quirks with it that I'm not too fond of, but overall it does make using this thing wirelessly, if it's set to the focus and everything, a little bit easier. For instance, as you can tell, pop up the exposure a little bit right there. It's pretty responsive. You can do you can do ISO, iris, shutter. I haven't been able to get frame rate to work. White balance does work. One of the things I have noticed, if you're shooting below f1.4 with this camera and you're trying to use this app, even though you can actually get it below f1.4, it doesn't read on here as 1.4. Like, for instance, if you're trying to go to 1.2, it won't read as 1.2. It only read at 1.4. Another thing I noticed, too, is that for ISOs, it only lets you get up to 1600 as a preset. And it doesn't let you go anything in between, for instance, anything between 200 to 400, 400 to 800. And obviously, with this camera, you can get up to 3200. So I'm hoping they come out with a fix later on, because I do shoot a lot at 2500 lately. And I would like to be able to kind of use this just on the go. How's the quality of the adapter? Like the Atomos just falls apart and is garbage. No, so the adapter on here is pretty solid. I actually ordered it from Condor Blue, which seems like this new company that's basically making cords specifically for the Blackmagic Pocket. So they've came out with I think it's a WEIPU. Don't quote me on that, but that's the name of the power volt adapter for the Blackmagic, and they're coming out with that to DTAP. They also came out with this really cool XLR mini to XLR adapter. The quality just sounds amazing. Now, depending on the mic, I have to kind of change the gain levels in the camera, but that's about normal. One of the things, though, that I have noticed, and I don't think this is the connector's fault, I think this is the camera, not all of my phantom-powered mics are working, even with phantom power turned on. So, for instance, I have this Shure Super 55, which I'm pretty much never going to use in video production, but it does work with the camera. I have another podcasting microphone, the SM57. That does not work with this camera, as well as some of my condenser mics do not work with this camera either, even with phantom power turned on. I don't know if it's just an incompatibility issue, but some of the XLR microphones just don't work. So be aware of that. You may need to test some of your mics. Maybe they'll work in a future firmware update, but figured I'd give that information out there. What's going on, Benjamin? The build quality of the adapter. This is being weird. I know, guys. It's so weird having you guys on the opposite side. Quality of the adapter is really nice. I mean, I'd take it out and show you guys, but we're actually streaming directly from the Blackmagic today. One other thing that Blackmagic made really easy is the ability to pop on the LUT and export the LUT kind of out of the camera. I mean, the GH5 does that as well, but it's nice to see that the Blackmagic lets us do that, because if I didn't, you guys would be seeing me nice and flat. Yes, Benjamin, I did see the Tilta cage, and it looks really cool. If you guys haven't seen, Tilta actually came out with a relatively a decently cost cage system, which not only is a cage for the Pocket, also lets you use Sony MPF batteries, which we're using now right here to power the camera. It gives you a wireless follow focus, which I guess sits right next to the battery, and then the cage itself. Correct me if I'm wrong. There should be other ones, other usabilities for the cage, but I didn't really see anything other than the follow focus and the battery power. Are you talking about other mics that also require phantom power? Yes, I'm talking other mics that require phantom power. For some reason, it seems to be hit and miss. I want to say 90% of my microphones are Shure microphones. I do have some Sennheiser and some Rode. The Rodes all seem to work. The Sennheisers seem to work, and the Shures seem to be the hit and miss. So I'll be very specific when I'm talking about the hit and miss. One of the ones I'm using is right over here because I was testing it earlier. It was the SM81. I use that a lot when it comes to musical productions, and that seems to not work with the phantom power of this camera. Even a V-mount power base plate. Yes, I did see that. They have a V-mount power base plate as well on the Tilta cage. So other than, we were talking about this earlier, the iPad app. We're talking about the XLR. Talked about streaming. I guess one of the things I wanted to harp on, well, first, do you guys have any questions before we move on? How are you guys doing today? I forgot to even ask. Has anyone gotten their camera in yet? And do you guys have any experiences with the camera? In the meantime, I'm trying to think. There is a few things. So I wanted to go over. I had a few questions about the video that we started off with. A few people wrote me in asking about the shutter speed of the camera. And I've always been using 180 degrees on the camera. If you look at the per little 60-second promo video I did, one of the things you'll notice is on the interview pieces, the background of my subject, Alan, it's flickering a little bit. And a lot of people thought that it was actually the shutter speed that was flickering. And believe it or not, what it was is in order to shoot this thing in an hour, we had to shoot it right before they opened. And they have a bunch of fans that are weirdly placed literally underneath all of the lights in the shop that we were shooting in. So they were literally just opening right before or right after we were filming this, and people were outside waiting, so we couldn't shut the fans off. And unfortunately, going back and looking at the video, we saw that the background had like a weird, fan look, but to the untrained or even to the trained eye, you may think that it was a shutter mismatch, and it wasn't in that scene. It was just unfortunate. Those were the circumstances we had to go into. And other than that, I played you guys this. I did want to play I have a clip showing how, as a lot of you guys know, this camera has dual ISOs. And what's weird is the color shift between the first set of native. What is this? Natus? The first set of native ISOs to the second set of native ISOs. And it's really interesting to see the color shift because it's almost like you're using a different camera, but it's kind of cool. Let's pull this up. I believe it's right here. All right, so we have the shot of the two stormtroopers. Do you have a fan going on above? So we have the clip of these two stormtroopers, and if you guys give it a second, you will see when I click the ISO, it will actually not only get brighter, but it'll also change the color scheme of the room. There we go. So it's interesting to see this kind of color shift. Now, granted, again, the exposure is a little bit higher now that the ISO's higher as well. I believe that was a jump from 1,000 to 1,250. And it was interesting to see these shifts because you don't see them as much when going below and above. Let's go back over here. Yeah, so like for instance, you see like the flicker right here. That's from the fan. Thank you for reminding me, guys. Turn this puppy off, and that way we lose that flicker. But literally, this flicker that you guys see in the background here, that was a lot of the background of the shots of the clip. But if you looked at Alan's face, you'll notice Alan wasn't flickering at all because he was actually lit half naturally and half with LEDs. So I plan on this kind of being a short live stream today, only because I kind of went over power last week. I went over kind of my thoughts of the camera. Nothing has really changed of my overview of the camera, other than I definitely believe it's more run and gun capable than I originally thought. I guess the difference between this and using a GH5 for run and gun is you have to kit this thing up to run and gun. But if it's kitted up, you can get some amazing shots. And I definitely think for the docs that I'm starting in 2 weeks, I'm going to be using this just because it's easier to have kind of the camera and the audio all together than having the camera, my zoom, all these extra pieces. And on top of that, I can use a little bit less lighting. Still have to bring a lighting kit with me, but due to how high this thing goes, I mean, it's crazy how well the performance is up to 3200 in this camera. So I guess I'm going to take questions from you guys. You guys have any questions out there? If not, this will be a quick little stream today. Run and gun, yeah. Yeah, and I did want to mention that just because in the first stream we did, I was very against this camera being run and gun. I just didn't think it was possible. And then I did that 60-second shot and turned out well. How many inputs does the audio adapter have? So it only has one XLR mini, and it has the one 3.5. It only has 2 channels in the camera as well. So your options are you can either use left and right from your XLR, left and right from your 3.5, or you can kind of take a mono mix and do one channel from the XLR mini, and then you can do one channel from the 3.5. But it only does the 2 channels versus using an audio recorder. So if you need multi-channel stereo audio, then this isn't going to be the all-in-one solution for you. You're still going to need an external recorder. Yeah, I know. I'm afraid I didn't see your last stream. It's about the need for an adapter. Okay, so Ronnie, when you say the need for an adapter, are you talking about a power adapter, an audio adapter? There's so many. There's the Metabones adapter, which actually, I just want to point out today, I'm actually not using the Metabones adapter. I actually have the Metabones on this little, although it's kind of blending into the background, this little rig here. I'm actually using the Viltrox today since the lens I'm using is a Tokina 11-16. And since it doesn't go below f1.8, you don't really see any ghosting or any kind of weird artifacts in the image. No lens adapter. Okay, so yeah, so that's what we're talking about. So this is the Viltrox. Again, like I was saying, if you go between below 1.8 on the Viltrox, you start to see weird things such as a much softer image than normal. You get a little bit of chroma, a little bit of purple fringing in some of the cases. But the Viltrox does work. My go-to, though, has been the Metabones, especially with the Sigma 18-35, just because when I'm getting those, nice creamy shots, you want everything to be nice and tack sharp, which is the whole point of using the Sigma. And you can't get that tack sharp, wide open look with the Viltrox. So just keep that in mind. When it comes to these adapters, a lot of the times you are going to get what you pay for. So, I mean, it's like $600 and $650 for a Metabones versus $150 for a Viltrox, but you got to kind of pick your poison. Specifically, the issue of auto stabilization. Okay, so from what I have experienced on the Viltrox, stabilization from Canon lenses does not work, even if it's turned on in the camera. On the Metabones, however, it does work. Now, they'll probably come up with a firmware update, and because part of the thing that I would think a firmware update would come out for the Metabones is the autofocus is not working at all. Now, you don't really buy this camera for autofocus. However, the push to autofocus does work really well with native lenses. And so I would like to see how it would work if it's possible to work with the Metabones. But currently, autofocus image stabilization isn't working. On the Metabones, it does seem to work. I've only tried the 24-105. I have not tried other lenses, so I'd love to hear from you guys. Have you tried other lenses? What has worked? As far as native lenses, all of the native lenses I have tried that do have image stabilization in them do work. You just have to turn them on in the camera, and if they have a switch, make sure that switch is turned on as well. And we're hitting 20 minutes. I wish I had a brewski over here like the craft show guys. I didn't have any for tonight only because I have a shoot early in the morning. I figured it'd be irresponsible of me. But I think next week's stream, we'll get in on that. And who knows, maybe if you guys can catch Craft Show's stream, if they do one tomorrow, hey, they'll probably have some cool little craft brews as well. In my search for reasonably priced lenses, many do not have in the lens. Yeah. So if you're looking for native lenses, the really good ones that have image stabilization are not gonna be budget friendly. As far as the ones that I know, on the cheap end, you have lenses like I have one here actually. Hold on. On the really cheap end, you have something like this, which is a 14-42. Ties that up. You got the 14-42. This is not a great lens by any means. It kind of is like a kit crap photography lens. Came with an old Lumix body I had, but the image stabilization works actually pretty decent with this. You also have the 12-35 from Lumix. It's f2.8, has image stabilization, and then they have the newer version. That's the 12-35 Mark II. You also have, I think, the 42.5. I think it's f1.2 has image stabilization, but again, it's to get really good image stabilization out of Lumix lenses, you're going to be paying a pretty penny unless you're trying to just get really cheap lenses like this with image stabilization, which at that point you're kind of compromising image quality for image stabilization. Jeff is watching the footage in HDR10. Oh, nice. I'm glad you guys got around to checking it out. If you guys haven't seen Craft Show, take a look at a lot of their work. Jeff is an amazing colorist, and Drew's an amazing DP. They do a lot of really good work, and we actually did a video together where I went out when the Mavic 2 came out, the Mavic 2 Pro, and I just took some test footage, and it was the most bland test footage you could ever imagine. It was literally, what can you get in the next hour and put it together to have ready for something tomorrow? And the way Jeff colored this footage, oh my God, it was ridiculous. Like, you had these blues that were literally just little pieces of balcony on buildings that just popped out, and they looked so cinematic and movie-like. It was ridiculous. So these guys are absolutely amazing. Why not buy MFT lenses rather than Canon? So yes, actually, here's the whole thing with Canon lenses. A lot of people who have had Micro Four Thirds have moved to Micro Four Thirds from either traditional using Canon DSLRs, from using Reds that have EF mount, to using Sonys that use that with an adapter, for an EF adapter. And for people like me who have come from the Canon area when it comes to interchangeable lens cameras, we have all these Canon lenses, and it's much cheaper to get an adapter and to use these professional lenses than going out and starting from the beginning and building up an entirely new lens collection. So in my case, for instance, when it comes to native lenses, I don't have a very large collection of native lenses. I just have basically what I need to go out on my GH5 and take some photos. And if I really needed to stay small and compact, take some videos with. But if you're starting from scratch and you think that you're going to stick with the Micro Four Thirds system, 100%, I would say start looking at Micro Four Thirds lenses. If you think you're going to stick with the system, you're definitely going to basically bypass the need of having an adapter. You're going to have autofocus on any bodies that you use that are Micro Four Thirds. The usability is overall better because these aren't Canon mount cameras. These are Micro Four Thirds cameras. So you get the most. You don't get the most out of it, necessarily the camera, but you get the most out of the features in the lens by using Micro Four Thirds. Oh, Jeff sent a Facebook message. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I'm going to have to check this after. Jeff sent me a video. We'll have to check that out later. But in the meantime, what else? What you guys have any other questions? Jeff, Drew, any questions from you guys? I haven't done too much filming. Oh, you know what? Actually, there's one more subject I can bring up, and I didn't intend on talking about this today, but I actually have them all right in front of me, so it's actually a good time to bring it up. Memory cards. So SD cards, the UHS-2 V90 cards, surprisingly work really well with this camera. So this was one that I bought for the GH5 to actually do the 400 megabits. It was an overkill card, but it was also an off-brand card. This is the Delkin V90. I tested this in the the Blackmagic, and it's interesting. I was basically able to film ProRes in every single mode, including 60 frames up to the highest HQ without a problem. Now, full disclosure, when it comes to 60 frames a second in ProRes HQ, I didn't film for 30 minutes. I just filmed for like 3 or 4 minutes, and it filmed on this. Now, it's possible that this thing can't, record continuously for 60 frames, but I have not tried that, and I will report back next time. But for the most part, this has worked with all of the ProRes modes. It has also worked with all of the 30 frames and lower RAW modes on the camera. But 60 frames per second RAW, this thing choked within a second. So figured you guys would like to know that. The other thing is this was an interesting card that a lot of people bought with the GH5 because for some reason it worked really well with the 400 megabits per second codec, even though it wasn't really it's not rated V90 or V60. I don't even know what the technical rating is, but it works really well. So I decided to test it in the camera, and after testing, in ProRes up to 30 frames per second, it works with all of the recording modes. However, once you go to 60 frames per second, this card only works basically in LT and proxy. I have not been able to get long form recording on 422 or HQ when it comes to 60 frames a second. And at that point, I didn't even try to film RAW because if it can't do that, it can't do RAW. I scratched that. I did try 30 frames per second RAW and it did not work. But I didn't even try 60 because I knew if 60 ProRes isn't going to work, the RAW isn't going to work. But this was a nice little budget carryover from the GH5 that I had. What is the brand of that SD card? Okay, so the first SD card is a Delkin V90 SD card. Full disclosure, I've seen varying results from people with these Delkins. I've seen some people who say they were amazing and for the price, you can't beat them. I've also seen some people say I got this card and it died right away. Or, I used it for a few weeks and it just couldn't keep up. So it seems like possibly there's some kind of, I guess, manufacturer quality control problem. Maybe in the beginning there was. This is almost a year later at this point that I got this card. So maybe they're better now. I noticed that they use a different logo on them now. So that could, be kind of a sign of changing them up a little bit. But this is the Delkin. This is the Lexar. But really, I don't really recommend this Lexar unless, you're just filming 30 frames. And even at that, I think this thing's basically going to stick with my GH5. And this, to be fair, I'm not even really using this as much because I'm actually, for the most part, because of the data rates, I'm using my old Atomos caddies with SSDs inside. So this one has a 480 gigabyte SSD, and I'm just hooking up via USB-C. And this pretty much gets everything up to raw 30 frames a second. But, the file sizes are so big, unless you're just doing a small little shoot where, the clips are not long take or long form, 64 gigs isn't going to last you an hour shoot. There's no way. You pretty much need either bigger cards, bigger CFast cards, or you need some kind of SSD to keep this thing going. Do you think we can do backups? No. So you can't do backups with this camera, unfortunately. One cool part about the GH5 with the dual card slots is it lets you do dual recording in case something happened. You can have one card that didn't fail and one card that possibly did. This camera does not let you do dual recording, but it has multiple card slots. Another thing I'll bring up, when you use an SSD, it always shows you 2 slots for media on the Blackmagic, and the SSD will always take the SD card slot. So it won't show you the amount of time available on your SD card and this. It's only going to show you, I guess the priority goes to the SSD. You can actually choose in the menu what you want the priority to be as far as recording priority. Mine's right now set to SD just because it's on the go. But I noticed whenever I plug this in, it tends to always take the SSD of priority over the SD card. Nothing that I've actually specifically chosen for that to happen, but it kind of makes sense because if you're plugging it in, why wouldn't it take priority? You can record to an external SSD. No, you cannot. You cannot record to an external SSD and a card at the same time. You can only record to one device at the same time. Now, technically, if you wanted to do some kind of backup, you could either record to an SSD and have some kind of HDMI recorder. If you have like a Shogun or something like that, that leads to the other issue. The HDMI out is only 1080. There is no 4K HDMI out. So for this stream, it's okay because I'm just using HDMI HD capture cards. But you can't get 4K out. So you could technically get a backup, but it's only going to be a 1080p backup. So if you're okay with that, you can film like that and have your backup. But you're not going to get with whether it be SSD, CFast, or SD, you can only record to one of those at a time. Yes, it is a little bit of a risk for the ceremonies. That's kind of why I was harsh on my first review of this camera when I was going over my thoughts of why I didn't think this camera was great for run and gun, and that was one of my thoughts as well. If you can't do the backup recording for live events or something really important, that's going to be a turnoff for some people. You just got to kind of pick your poison. If that is a huge deal breaker for you, then no, this camera may not be for you. But if you can live with it, or you can kind of, if you're okay with the workaround of getting some kind of HDMI recorder to have an HD, high quality, but an HD backup, then that's your backup solution for you. No, I don't think that. Ronnie asks, do you think that the 4K from the HDMI is a hardware issue or a firmware update? So yeah, I think it's a hardware issue. I think if they could have done 4K out, I think they would have. I don't believe that this will come in a firmware update where we can get HDMI. I believe that's kind of something that would have been in the camera off the bat. To give this thing credit, just like with the original Pocket camera, you were able to get amazing recording internally, including RAW on the original and this. So it's kind of like maybe their mentality was, why do you need a 4K signal out when you have the best recording options on this camera internally? And I guess that's a good question. The only reason I could think of getting a 4K signal out at this point is, well, the two reasons are redundancy, or if you need to stream in 4K, but there's a lot better cameras to do live streaming than the Blackmagic. I think that's kind of, taking a Ferrari to go kind of drive it to Publix and do your grocery shopping. It's really, really overkill. And the setup, believe it or not, it wasn't a crazy long time to set this whole little rig up, but it did take a lot longer than, for instance, when I have everyone's favorite hated camera, the Z Cam. This is my favorite live stream Micro Four Thirds camera, just because of the size and the ease of use. But yeah, it took a little bit longer, especially because I don't have that nice little flip out screen. So my flip out screen is the screen on the computer that shows me what everything looks like and my meters and everything. Otherwise, I'd have to have some kind of external monitor. You have a lens in a cage. Yeah, if you think you want to try using an external recorder, you do it, man. Let us know how it is. It'd be great if the Atomos would take out a monitor and recorder with USB-C input. That's actually an interesting. That's an interesting point. I don't know how that would work if they could take the signal from USB-C and kind of give you a live image. I think kind of that's probably where the whole hiccup is in doing that. Maybe they can create a camera in the future that does it, but I'm not necessarily sure you can get. I'm not an engineer, so I guess I wouldn't be the right person to answer that. But I would guess that that's part of the problem. I feel like if it was possible, you'd almost think they would come out with something right off the bat. But you never know. That's a good idea though. If it can't be done on this camera, it would be nice to maybe see in the future if maybe you can do some kind of USB-C video out. So we're about to hit 37 minutes. My limit to these things, I try to keep them to 45 max. So you guys have any other questions? Or I think next week, this week I have a shoot tomorrow, but it's nothing really too interesting. I am going to be using the Blackmagic for it, but I don't really think I'm going to show any footage, just talking head stuff. I do have a shoot on Thursday in Miami. And next week, what I'll try to do is it's about half ground, half aerial. So I'll try to sneak a few raw shots because we're gonna light everything. It's gonna be proper. So I'll try to sneak a few raw shots and kind of see if we can get some grade in there and see how this thing looks. Again, I haven't really messed with the raw, and I'm definitely not using raw for the shoot, but a few frames doesn't hurt. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I guess we'll wrap this thing up here. Next week we'll have some brewskis and a little bit more going on. I actually have one of the athletes for a wakeboarding documentary I'm working on flies in tomorrow night. So maybe he'll come on the show next week. He's here for a few weeks while we film for this wakeboarding documentary. His part of the wakeboarding documentary, and he's actually a little bit of a filmmaker as well when it comes to kind of like making sports videos. So it'd be interesting to kind of see his take on things. And until then, guys, like I said, yeah, absolutely. Craft Show, thank you for tuning in. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. I want to kind of do these every Monday at 6 p.m. It's basically when I get home, and it gives me a little bit of time to get these things set up. And Mondays tend to be my slow days. So if you guys stick with it, we will do more of these. So until next time, my name's Jeff Fagan, and I'll see you out there. Keep creating, guys.